Well, hey, Grant, thank you so much for taking time to do this interview. And you're a professional speaker, but you also created a company that helps people become professional speakers. Can you walk us through a little bit about your journey to get to that in your life?
Yeah, thanks for letting me hang out with you, Doug. Yeah, like you mentioned, I've been in the speaking industry for pretty much most of my professional career. And today, basically, what that looks like is we work with speakers at all different ages and stages of life and helping them understand how do you find and book paid speaking gigs. And so that really came out of my own desire. If we go actually way back, when I was in high school, I was really involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a big impact on my life. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, that seems like a really cool gig. And just basically kind of felt like if I could make the kind of impact in others' lives that he had made in mine, like that just seemed fulfilling and worthwhile. And so actually in college, I worked for a guy who was a full-time speaker. So kind of got to help a little bit behind the scenes and
Hmm.
kind of got to help with, like travel, logistics, contracts, like just kind of got to see like, okay, this is a thing, what does this look like? And actually I went to Bible college, was a youth pastor for a little while myself. And that just gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I felt like I was decent at and wanted to do more of, but just had no idea, how does this mysterious world work? And so when I decided I want to go all in as a speaker, there wasn't any books or podcasts or YouTube videos or just resources on how to do this. And so I found myself like just stalking other speakers, just emailing them, harassing them, just peppering them with questions, can I pick your brain type stuff, and just taking anything I could soak up and started just applying that. And eventually got to a point where I was booking a few gigs and more gigs and more gigs, and got to a spot where I was doing about 60 or 70 gigs a year.
Wow.
And so I was doing that for a little while, and then just had a lot of people asking me like, "Hey, man, I want to be a speaker. I want to do what you've done." And so how would I do that? And so that's really what the Speaker Lab kind of evolved into, where the training and coaching side of teaching people and helping people understand how do you find and book gigs and spread your message and generate an income and impact with that.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, so it sounds like we have very similar stories. I was deeply impacted by a youth pastor in my life. Youth ministry changed my life. Same thing. I want to do that.
Yep.
Got into youth ministry. I'm just curious, was that a hard transition from you to jump from ministry into full time speaking, non ministry related? What was that journey like?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because I felt like, and you may have been similar since you come from this world, but you kind of feel like, all right, I went to Bible college to do this thing. You get into doing it, and then you kind of feel like, all right, this is maybe what I'm supposed to do for life, and then you get into it real quick, and I don't know about you, but I was just like, this is not what I signed up for, and it was just like less than an ideal experience. And I also knew like, okay, not all. Like the lead pastor that I worked with was just not a great guy to work with, and one of those people that was well loved on the weekends and not great to work with behind the scenes. And so,
Mm.
and I talked with enough other buddies who had kind of similar situations, and so it also just kind of like gave me a chance to go like, well, let me back up. When we were on staff at this church, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and there's nothing like bringing a kid into the world that just causes you to step back and be like, all right, what am I doing with my life, and what do I
Right.
want to be when I grow up? And the thing I kept coming back to is speaking. Speaking again was one of those things that being in church, it gave me a lot of reps, it gave me a lot of at bats and opportunities to speak. And so it just for a little while there, just trying to matter of trying to think through like, okay, do I want to try to find another youth pastor gig, or do I want to try to pursue the speaking dream? And I kind of felt like I'd rather pursue the speaking dream and it be a complete train wreck, but at least I know I tried, than to always look back and be like, I think I could have given that a shot, but I'll never know because I didn't make a run at it.
Yeah, so I certainly want to get into your advice for people who want to be speakers, but I'm curious. Okay, so you jump out of youth ministry. I want to be a full time speaker. You went from speaking to churches about Jesus to what did you even speak on? I'm just curious. What direction did you go there?
Yeah, it was a bit challenging for me at first because to your point, like so much of the speaking, basically all the speaking I'd done up to that point is in a church context. And so, you're used to pulling something from the Bible, something from scripture and telling some type of story there. And it's like, well, what do you do out other than that? So like, how do you put together a talk that doesn't involve that? And so I vividly remember there was another youth speaker that I looked up to, admired. I'd emailed, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be in the area. Come if you want to come see my speak." And so I drove a couple of hours to go see his talk. He spoke at this conference, this convention for a couple thousand people. And I remember just sitting in the audience, just watching this. And I think he came from some sort of like ministry background as well. And I saw his talk, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I could do this." Like it just was like this epiphany of like, once I could see it, it's like any like sermon message that you would give, like literally, if you just take scripture out, there's still like a good message to it. And so that was just kind of a eureka light bulb moment for me watching him speak and present. So a lot of the speaking I did early on was in the education space. I did a lot with high schools, a lot with colleges. I didn't do a ton in the church world. It's kind of my advice is always it's difficult to market to both because you both sides get nervous about the other side. Meaning like
Mm.
if I'm trying to speak at a school, let's say I'm trying to speak at a school assembly and you're trying to market to a high school principal, but you're also trying to speak at youth group functions or camps or retreats or whatever, and you're trying to market to a youth pastor, like they talk two different languages, right? They both work with the same teenagers, but one side makes the other side a little bit nervous. And so trying to speak to both of them doesn't work real well. And so I was really intentional about speaking primarily in the school space for a variety of different reasons. But that and occasionally, like I might go speak at a school, and a principal is like, "Hey, can you come speak to my local church, youth group or something like that?" And yeah, I did that from time to time. But for the most part, it was primarily like in the school education space.
Yeah. So you talked about how you went to that the guy that came into town. You saw him speak in front of thousands of people. You said, "Hey, I think I can do that." So I'm sure there's
Yeah.
a ton of people listening to this right now saying, "I've had that exact thought. I want to be a speaker as well." How do you even know if you could be a speaker or not? Where do you encourage people to start that may be sitting in that same seat you were sitting in that day?
Yeah, well, I think at the time it wasn't like I've never spoken before, I've never
Right.
done this, and I just I should be up there. But like I'd done a lot of speaking before, it'd been in the church context, so I had enough at bats and reps, and I'd got feedback from people to feel like okay, I'm not the best in the world, but I'm not horrible, and there's something there, and I feel like I could be decent at this. And so it was some of it was just kind of some self-awareness, some of it was I'd had enough at bats and had gotten like positive feedback from other people like hey you're pretty good at this. So I think those type of things also just help give me some confidence. What I see with a lot of speakers that we work with today who may be in a similar spot are speakers who are going like I've done some stuff for my work or at church or within the community, and I've had some random things that I've spoke at here or there. They have been things that have been kind of fallen in my lap. They've been word of mouth or referrals or that sort of thing. And I've done a few here and there. Maybe I've been paid a time or two. Maybe I've done a bunch for free. And I would love to do more of those. I just don't know how do I get started and what do I charge and who hires speakers? What do I speak about? And like, again, how does this work? And so that was the big thing that we started to see is, there's a lot of people who have speaking experience, but just don't know how do you actually get paid to do that and how do you turn it into more of a business.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Where, I would say that I'm in a similar situation to what you just mentioned. What would your encouragement be for me to start?
Yeah, so the main thing that we teach is we teach what we call a speaker success roadmap. It makes the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK. And so what we can do is, if you want, I can just kind of walk through at a high level what that is, and
Sure.
we can dig in wherever you want. But again, the acronym SPEAK. S is to select a problem to solve. Now, this is the most important part of the process here, and this comes down to two key questions that you need to ask. One is who do you speak to, and number two is what problem do you solve? Now, the challenge here for a lot of speakers is we tend to go as like broad and vague and wide as possible. And so, who do you speak to? I don't know, man. I speak to people. I speak to humans. My message is for everybody, right? And if we were to ask, like, what do you speak about? Like, I don't know. What do you want me to speak about? I can speak about, ministry or church or family or faith or marketing or business or sales. It's like we want to spread this net as far and wide as possible. But what we will always tell our students is you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. The steakhouse and not the buffet. Meaning, Doug, if you and I were going to grab a bite to eat, we're looking for a good steak. Like we have a choice. We could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 things that they offer, and they're all mediocre. Or you could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well, right? So they don't do seafood, they don't do lasagna, they don't do tacos, they don't do cake. They do steak. And so that's really what you want to be as a speaker, which again is counterintuitive because we think the more things we can speak about and the more people we can speak to, the more opportunities we will have. But that's not what people are looking for. People are looking for you to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. So again, once you understand that and you're clear on that, then everything else becomes a lot simpler. So that's the first part of the process is the S, select a problem to solve. The P is to prepare your talk. So get really, really clear on the solution that you're going to bring to that problem. And at the same time, I think it's important to note that not all speeches look and speaking looks the same. And what I mean by that is I know for me personally, I do really well in like a 1 hour block, meaning like that could be a keynote, that could be a workshop, it could be a few hundred people, it could be a few thousand people. I'm good in that setting. Where I don't feel like I'm good at, or what I'm not super interested in, is like multi-day trainings and like these long workshops, and there's other speakers who are just like, oh, you can't do anything in an hour. Like, why? What's the point of that? Like, I want to go deep with 20 people for 5 days. I'm like, that sounds miserable, right? But everybody's different, and it's not that one's better or worse than the other. But as a speaker, you kind of decide what's the best way to solve that problem that we identified in the S part of the framework. The next part, so we got S, we got P. The E is to establish yourself as the expert. So there's two key marketing tools every speaker needs. You need a website and a demo video. Website and demo video. So in this day and age, if you don't have a website, you don't exist. People won't take you seriously. And you need a demo video. Now, what exactly is a demo video and why is it important? Think of it like a movie trailer. The point of a movie trailer is they're going to take this like 2 hour movie, they're going to boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes. Within those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme, what's kind of the genre of that the movie is in. And the point of the movie trailer and the point of the demo video is to make people want to see more. So before either of us would go see a movie, like, I just need to see it. I need to see the trailer. Just let me watch the trailer and I'll know within a minute, probably less than that, whether or not it's a fit or something that I want to see. Because you got to remember, for an event planner who's hiring a speaker, they are putting a speaker on the stage in front of their audience, maybe in front of their board or their bosses. They are taking a significant risk. I hope this person is good. I hope they don't say anything inappropriate. I hope they don't embarrass me. I hope they deliver. You hope all these things. And so in order to do that, you probably want to see something versus like talking to a speaker and the speaker's just like, no, I'm really good. Just trust me. Like, it's hard to take that risk. So event planners are in the risk mitigation business. And so a demo video is a good example of how you can reduce that risk for them. The next part of the process is acquire paid speaking gigs. And so this is where speakers kind of make a mistake of, okay, I'm interested in speaking. I'm clear on who I speak to, what problem I solve. I'm clear on my talk. I've got my website. I got my video. Man, now I just sit back and wait for the phone to ring. And it just doesn't work like that. Like, you have to have a process and a system in place to be able to consistently find and book gigs. And then the last part of the process is K, is know when to scale. Meaning a lot of people who are interested in speaking are also interested in coaching or consulting or doing a podcast or doing some type of training, maybe doing a book. So you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. Something's going to come first, something's going to come last, and you got to decide how does speaking fit into the mix. And so, for example, there are speakers that I know who do 100 gigs a year and don't do anything else. And that's fine. And speakers that do 10 gigs a year and primarily do a ton of consulting and have a book. And every other combination that you can think of there. So again, it's not that one's better or worse, but you've got to decide what makes sense for you and how speaking fits into the mix. So again, that's kind of the just overarching, kind of the big picture there of the Speak framework that we teach students.
Yeah, I just want to dive into a few of those. As far as getting clear on your message and the problem that you solve, what would you encourage someone to do as far as a process for getting that clear message? My personality is perfect. Like, exactly what you said. Hey, I can speak on 20 different things, and
Totally.
it actually bothers me to think about narrowing down, which is always my issue. So
But we understand it in other contexts. So let me give you an example. So let's imagine that God forbid that you had a brain issue and you had to have brain surgery, right? You could go to your local family medical doctor. They are a doctor. They went to med school. They may or may not have performed some surgery before. They probably know more about the brain than you or I. But if they've never done brain surgery, I don't want them cutting me open versus like, yeah, I don't know, man, I could probably figure it out. Versus like a brain surgeon who day in, day out, that's all they do. So if you have a broken arm, they're not going to help you. If you've got Rona, they're not going to help you. But if you got a brain issue, like, that's who you're going to go to. And so we understand it in these other contexts that people want specialists, not generalists who can speak on a whole bunch of just random different things there. Now, I also understand that like narrowing it down can be very, very difficult. And so this is where we find that some of the with what we do with some of our coaching and training programs within the Speaker Lab is really helpful because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. Like, we're all so close to our own stuff where we're just like, man, I don't know, like all these different options and like, how do you narrow it down? How do you figure it out? And there is absolutely an overlap between what you're interested in, what you're knowledgeable on, what you're passionate about, what your experience is, and what is it that the organizations and groups actually hire speakers for. There has to be some type of overlap there. Because if you said, hey man, this is crazy, but I'm actually like world ranked underwater basket weaver. I'm really, really good, and I think I can speak on that. And I want to charge $50,000 a pop to speak on underwater basket weaving. I was like, that's cute, but like nobody's paying you for that, because there's not a market that exists, at least as far as I'm concerned. But so you have to find that type of overlap there. So oftentimes, one of the best things you can do is, I find a good exercise is to look for other speakers who are doing something similar to what you may want to do, and who are a step or two ahead of you, not light years ahead of you, but a step or two ahead of you. So if you're like, I want to be a motivational speaker, who's Tony Robbins? What's Tony up to? What's he speaking at? No, that's not what we're talking about. Like, you're looking for other people who are doing something very, very similar and doing it in a space or in a way that makes sense and resonates with you. And so what you're doing there is, if you said, okay, I come from well, actually, let's just kind of role play it. Tell me just real quick, tell me about like your background, your experience, where you come from.
Yeah, born and raised in Pittsburgh. Let's see, interesting facts about me. So I work at a nonprofit rescue mission in Pittsburgh. So I do oversee fundraising for an organization that helps the homeless men, women, and children of our city. I also own this
Okay.
organization called L3 Leadership. I'm really passionate about connecting and developing leaders in our city and around the nation.
Okay. So one of the things that you said there that I know is a problem for organizations is fundraising for nonprofits, right? That's a world that it's a world that you understand. Sounds like you've got some experience there, right? So that would be
Yeah.
some low-hanging fruit that we could just start with. Oftentimes it's good to start with what's your experience, what's your background, what's your knowledge, versus something that, like, if you described all that to me and you said, hey man, what I really want to do though is I wanted to teach you know, home remodeling and how to design furniture or whatever, just like, wait, I didn't hear anything about that and what you just said. So let's start with something you already know, because as it relates to like nonprofits and fundraising, this is a world that you're familiar with. You understand like the organizations, other associations. You understand, you've probably been to some of those events. You probably know other people who have spoke at some of those events. You probably know already some of those decision makers. The language, the challenges, the problems, like, the insider baseball knowledge. And so you already have so much experience there. Now, the challenge that some speakers run into is they're like, okay, I've got a lot of experience with, in this case, a nonprofit fundraising, but man, I'm just tired of this. I want to do something totally different. It's like, that's fine, but let's start with something that because when you're thinking about, who do I speak to, what problem do I solve, you're not making a permanent decision. Like, you're not getting a tattoo here. We're picking a starting point. So let me give an example.
Mm.
There's a speaker that we worked with who came out of the restaurant world and had done a lot of consulting in like the restaurant world. And he's like, man, I'm tired of the restaurant world. I was like, I get it, but let's start there. And so
That's
he
good.
started in the restaurant world and had a bunch of contacts, connections there, and really got the ball rolling. And then it was able to open up other doors of opportunity outside of the restaurant world. But let's start with like the low hanging fruit of what it is that you already know. And so today, as far as I know, I think he does very little in the restaurant space, but that's where he got his start. And then once you kind of get going, then you can kind of pivot and iterate from there. So I always tell speakers, like, it's much easier to steer a car in motion than it is to steer a car in park. And so, like, let's get going. Let's figure out something here that might work. Now, if you said, all right, based on all this conversation thus far, I'm interested in speaking to nonprofits on fundraising, and you start browsing around at possible events that you could speak at, or other speakers who are doing something similar. And let's say you couldn't find anything and you're like, oh man, this is perfect. I'm going to be the first. No, like, that's not what we're looking for here. Like, you're looking for like, there's like proven track record here. Like, this is
Yeah,
something that
that's good.
like people are actually doing. And it helps just kind of validate that this is like an opportunity that exists in the marketplace. So again, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how you want to be thinking about this.
No, that's so good. I mean, I'm an Enneagram 7, and so, the thought of being pigeonholed into one specific talk,
Totally.
I mean, I always think through like Dave Ramsey. Now, again, his platform's enabled him to speak about many things, but, it's like, how do you answer the same questions for 30 years over and over again on the same subject? I mean, he's helping a ton of people. But anyway, that was really, really fascinating. Um,
And again, let me give you an example. Again, over time, so you take someone like Ramsey. I
yeah,
live here in Nashville. I live five
right.
minutes from Ramsey's headquarters. And so it is a huge metropolis there, and they do a lot of different things there, right? But they got their start just helping
Yep.
people with debt and just helping people with budgeting, right? And you see other examples of that. So, for example, let's take Nike. Nike is a huge multi-billion-dollar organization that will sell anything they can put a swoosh on. But that's not how they got their start. They got their start by selling a very specific type of running shoe designed for long distance college runners. That was it. So we're gonna we literally are gonna take a waffle iron. We're gonna make this very specific type of shoe for this one specific type of audience. And then once we kind of figure that out, oh, what if we made walking shoes? What if we made a running shoe? What if we made a basketball shoe? What if we make basketballs? What if we make hats? What if we, and it evolves from there. So you look at Nike and you're like, man, they have everything, but that's not how they got their start. Another example, like in the speaking world or in like the personal brand world, as someone like a Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Gary does a ton on a whole bunch of different topics. He's super hot on like crypto right now and NFTs, and he does a lot with social media and marketing and just a whole variety of things. But whereas like today, there's organizations, companies, groups that may hire Gary to talk about anything he wants to talk about. Where he got his start
Yeah.
was, do you know what it is? Where he got
Wine.
his start? Wine.
Wine TV. Yeah.
One specific type of thing. He did wine for years and years and
So
years.
good.
And then it's like, okay, I did wine. Now let's kind of evolve to something else. And now it's evolved. So like we see him where he is today. We see Ramsey where he is today. We see Nike where they are today. But that's not where they got their start. So focusing on one specific thing, solving one specific problem for one specific audience.
It's so good. You've mentioned several times about acquiring paid speaking gigs and looking for them. You said they don't just fall in your lap. Can you talk about that process? I think that strings a lot of people up.
Yeah, so I think again, a mistake that some speakers make is, all right, I got my website, I got my demo video, and then it's just kind of a reactive thing. Now I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to wait, because that's what historically has happened. So you mentioned like you've done a couple gigs here or there, and it's just kind of been word of mouth. Something's kind of fallen in your lap, and so it's great when that happens, but it's really, really difficult to build a business that way. And so you have to change from being reactive to being more proactive. And so remember, we're solving a specific problem. And so I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in high school, one of the best times of year, one of the best days was a snow day. And a snow day was great, not just because you got out of school, but because me and a buddy, we would always go to like the rich neighborhoods, and we would shovel driveways and shovel snow off the driveways, and we would make bank. We'd make a couple $100 a day, which is two teenagers is like it's $1 million. It was amazing. And the reason this worked is that we didn't sit back and just sit and wait for, I don't know, someone to find us in the yellow pages, or, someone to think, oh, we should reach out to find someone to come shovel the driveway. No. Like we went to those places and we went door to door and just knocked on the door. Hey, you have that problem that exists in your driveway. Would you like for us to make that disappear for you right now? And so how does this translate for speakers? Well, event planners are looking for speakers, right? So if you think about like annual conferences or regular events or associations or groups, so many of these they're used to hiring speakers. They're planning on hiring speakers. And so when you reach out to them, you're not presenting a solution to a problem that they don't have. They are planning on hiring a speaker. You are showing them why you may be a good fit for their event. And so again, it's a lot more proactive in terms of like reaching out to event planners, building relationships with other speakers. As you build some momentum there, you're reaching out anytime that you speak at an event. I've heard it said that speaking leads to more speaking, meaning that you're going to have someone in the audience who sees you, or the event planner refers you to someone else, or you're going to have the event planner that you work with may bring you back in a couple of years. And so it starts to kind of build some momentum there, but you're not going to build any of that momentum if you're just like, I have my website up and then I posted something on social media and now I just wait for the phone to ring. Like it doesn't work like that. You have to be a little bit more proactive to kind of get the ball rolling.
And I'm assuming that's the process even before. Would you ever encourage like speaker bureaus or things like that? Or is that more a result of already establishing yourself as a speaker?
Yeah, good question. So people oftentimes assume, especially early on, like because everything I just described there in terms of like reaching out to event planners, following up, doing that sort of thing, like it's intimidating, it's daunting. I totally get that, right? And so oftentimes it's like, hey, how do I just get in with a bureau or an agency who's just going to do the hard part for me, right? It's kind of like if I go back to high school and like, hey, can someone else go knock on these doors? I'm just going to stand down here, and if someone else can be my front man and just like, oh, yep, you're good, $20, start shoveling the driveway, right? It would be great if it worked like that, but that's not the way it works. And so speaker bureaus, I've heard it explained like this. Speaker bureaus don't create demand, they manage demand. And what that means is if you're already being booked a lot, if you're swamped with bookings all of a sudden, if you're swamped with leads, they can do a good job coming in and facilitating that. But if you're not getting any bookings, you don't have any traction whatsoever. It's not like they're sitting around going like, man, we have all these gigs. If only we had speakers to fill them. Like it just doesn't work like that. And so I know in my career, I've done hundreds and hundreds of paid speaking gigs, and I'd say probably less than 15 of them have come from a bureau. And so if I get a bureau gig, that's awesome, but I'm not banking on it. I'm not building my business on it. The speakers who they're exclusive with bureaus or they speak 100% with bureau based gigs, it's very 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 small, like less than a percent of speakers industry wide, because it's not super common. You also got to remember that bureaus work based on a commission. And so if I have the choice to book a brand new speaker who charges, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000, or a speaker who's been at this for a couple of years who charges 10, 20, 30, $40,000, like I'm probably going to make a bigger commission booking this known speaker versus someone who's brand new, where I'm going to make maybe a couple $100 from a commission. So I would speakers everywhere need to just put it aside of like, a bureau is not a fit, because a bureau, they're working with hundreds, if not 1,000 speakers on their roster. My name and face is on a whole bunch of speaker bureaus, and it doesn't make any difference at all, because typically, like, you think about like that 80-20 principle, it's not even that much. It's probably 95-5. 5% of speakers on a bureau's website are producing 95% of the revenue for that bureau. It's very very small. So I just would say, put it completely outside of your mind. Focus on you booking gigs, because nobody's going to book gigs. Nobody's going to care about it more than you.
Yeah, and so when you're looking for them, talk about pricing. How do you determine what prices you charge and all of those things?
Yeah, I'll give you a shortcut answer and a longer answer. We'll start with the long one. So, there's a lot of variables and factors that go into it, right? And speaking fees is much more of an art than a science. And again, a lot of different variables here. A couple of the variables. One is going to be your industry. You can charge more in some industries versus others. You can charge more speaking to corporations versus nonprofits. You can charge more speaking to colleges versus elementary schools. Again, it's not that one's better or worse than the other. Every industry kind of has some different fee ranges and that they're used to paying. Another factor and variable is going to be your marketing materials. So we talked about like your website, your demo video. If an organization or group is going to hire you, they're probably looking at you and two or three or four other speakers. So whether we like it or not, people judge books by their covers. And so you want to make sure that your stuff looks polished, it looks professional, it looks sharp. If you are, a $5,000 speaker, a $10,000 speaker, or a $500 speaker, and your website and demo video looks like crap, it's just people are going to assume like you're a bad speaker. Now that may not be fair or accurate, but that's the assumption based on your marketing materials. Now, that also does not mean that you need to have spent tens of thousands of dollars to create an amazing website or video. Like, with the technology and tools and resources available today, you can get a really well done website and a really well done demo video for very very inexpensive. In fact, inside of one of our programs inside the Speaker Lab, like, we actually create the website and demo video for you. So most speakers like have a difficult time, so we just like, hey, no, we'll just take care of it. We'll take that off your plate. We'll build it for you, so
Wow.
you don't have to worry about it. So you need to make sure your stuff looks sharp and professional. And then another factor and variable is going to be your experience level. If you're a brand new speaker just getting started, you're probably just not going to be as good of a speaker as someone who's been doing this for 10 or 20 years and has had a lot more reps and a lot more at bats. Is probably just a better speaker. So those are a couple of variables and factors that are going to go into play. Now, the shortcut answer is, we put together a free tool. It's a speaking fee calculator. So if people want to check it out, again, it's totally free over at myspeakerfee.com. Myspeakerfee.com. You answer like 10 questions or so. It's multiple choice questions, and it'll spit out a number for you at the bottom of what you should be charging. Now, again, it's much more of an art than a science, but it gives you something, because you're trying to think about like, okay, all these different variables, like, how does that apply to me? So go there, myspeakerfee.com, answer some questions. It'll spit out a number. You can go back, play with different variables, different combinations, see how it changes things. But it's something to like, man, I have no clue, zero clue, but that'll at least get you in the ballpark.
And when you're engaged with a conversation with an event planner, and they bring up, hey, what's your fee? I mean, do you just give them a flat out fee? Do you just leave that open to negotiation? Do you say, what's your budget? Do you have any tips on that actual conversation?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times I think a speaker should have what their fee is, and so you're not just going into it, hey, what's your budget? I'm going to make that work. Like, I wouldn't recommend that. So have a fee in mind there. But when you go into it, a lot of times when we get to that part of the conversation, and this is again probably a over the phone conversation. This is typically not going to happen via email or anything like that. But once you're on the phone with them, and they're, you've had a bunch of conversation in terms of, tell me about the event, tell me what you're looking for, tell me how many people are going to be there, when is it, do the dates work, what is it that you're actually looking for? Because that's another variable that goes into it is, like we talked about earlier, maybe for me, they're just looking for, we just want you to come in and do a 1 hour keynote and that's it. And someone else are like, can you do a keynote and then a follow-up workshop? And then for the next 3 months, can you do a once a month Zoom call, like to help implement what we covered and talked about, right? It's kind of like if you called up a local car dealership and you're like, how much is a car? And they're like, well, it depends. Like, no, just tell me, like, how much is a car? Like, oh, man, there's a ton of different variables that go into that, right? So the same thing is true for speakers. Is like, how much is a speech? Well, it just kind of depends what you're looking for, and so know in your mind like what that range might be for you as a speaker. But the other thing I would say is to understand ways that they can provide value to you that may not show up in the bank account. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say that your fee is, let's say you do the my speaker fee calculator, and it comes back and says your fee is $5,000. Okay, so let's say you're talking to a potential event planner, and you're talking to them, and they say, well, our budget is $1,000. Okay, so on one hand, you could be like, nope, not interested, I'm out. The other thing that I don't think you'd want to do is you just be like, yeah, $1,000, I can make that work, and just immediately like, okay, I'm in. So what you want to try to do is, you're providing something of value. You want to receive something of value. Now, the thing that you receive in terms of value can look a lot of different ways. So, for example, let's say that the event that you're going to be speaking at is, let's say you do some consulting on the side. And let's say that the audience that you'd be speaking to is filled with your ideal potential client for consulting. And so, man, if I go speak and I pick up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consulting clients, that's worth way more than what they're going to pay me or what they could pay me. Okay. So that may be valuable. Let's say you have some type of book that you sell and, like they're going to, for their speaking budget, they only have $1,000, but also for their like education or training or resources budget, they have another couple thousand. And so, yeah, we're going to buy a book for one of your books for every attendee in the audience. Okay, so that could be a value. Another value could be, I've done this a few times where I worked with a client that was really well connected with other event planners I was trying to get in with, and so I said, tell you what, I'll do a reduced fee if I do a good job. And again, it's contingent on I got to show up and deliver. I got to do my part. But if I do a good job, I'd like for you to make just write a recommendation letter and send that to 5 other potential clients that would be a good fit for me, and just make a personal introduction. Now, again, it doesn't show up in the bottom line in terms of the check, but to them that costs nothing. But to me, that's incredibly valuable, because if they make those 5 introductions and I book, 1 or 2 or 3 of those gigs, that's totally worth it for me, right? Another variable or factor could be the location. So my wife has, half joking, half serious, said, Grant will speak for free in Hawaii as long as the family gets to come, So it could just be it could be a cool location. There's a friend of mine a year or two ago, and he was invited to speak at something I think it was in Spain or Europe or something like that. And he's like, I don't know, I don't do a ton of speaking. Should I do this? They don't have much of a budget. I was like, negotiate to have them pay for you and your wife, negotiate to have them pay for a couple extra days of the hotel and the lodging that they're already going to be paying for, and turn it into a vacation. So he's like, awesome. So they turned it into a European vacation that was on someone else's dime. And so again, it's the type of thing that they received value in exchange for the value that was offered. Maybe there's going to be a really good videographer there. And so we talked about the importance of having a good demo video. So getting good footage is really important. And so maybe negotiating, hey, I get the footage that your videographer is doing, or maybe they have an in-house videographer that could do the editing to create a demo video for you. So again, there's all these different ways that you can get value that may or may not connect to what the paycheck says.
Yeah, that's so good. You've mentioned the Speaker Lab multiple times. Can you just again pitch our audience on the Speaker Lab, what value it provides, and how they can be a part of it?
Yeah, so again, the speaker lab is what I wish I had when I got started. When I was just like, man, I think I can do this. I want to know, like, again, who do I speak to and how much do I charge and who hires speakers, and just someone tell me, how does this mysterious speaking industry work? And so that's what we do. We provide coaching and training for speakers who at all different levels. So we worked with speakers in every US state in 49 different countries and all different categories, subjects, genres, industries, topics that you can think of. And so helping them understand how to build and grow your speaking business and to share your message with the world.
Yeah, and I know getting a speaking engagement is just the first step. Then you actually need to make sure it's a good experience. You mentioned that. Any tips there as far as, hey, once you sign that contract, making it as good of an experience for the event planner and the organization as possible?
Yeah, that's such a great question because it's so much more than just what happens on stage. And what I mean by that is if you show up and you do a great job on stage, but you're a pain in the butt to work with. And by pain in the butt, I don't mean that like you're a prima donna or that you're demanding or that you're a diva or anything like that. I just mean like you're unorganized, you're sloppy. You said you were going to show up at a certain time and you're late, or you didn't show up at all, or they email you a question and it takes you days and days to get back to them. Like nobody wants to work with that speaker. And again, that's not exclusive to just a speaker. It's like if you go to a restaurant and like the food is, man, it's so good, the food is so amazing, but the restaurant's dirty, the service is bad, it takes forever to get your food. You talk to the manager's a jerk. You're just like, man, the food's so good, but like I don't know that I want to keep experiencing this. Like, it's just not worth it. And so much more than so much. There's so much to being a speaker that's more than just being a speaker. Like, be providing a customer service experience. Because you got to remember, from an event planner standpoint, an event planner is thinking about you, the speaker, and they're thinking about 100 or 1,000 other details for that event. So the simpler that you can make things for them, the easier that you can make their life, the more likely they're going to want to be to work with you. I was like half joking, half serious. That like I can be mediocre on stage, but if I'm great to work with off
Hmm.
stage and I just make their life easy, they're a lot more likely to want to work with me in the future versus just like, man, I'm amazing on stage, but I'm a pain in the butt to work with. So yes, you're exactly right that you want to make sure you're delivering on stage, but you also want to make sure you're delivering off stage as well.
So good. I want to jump into the lightning round in a moment. So, any other last words for aspiring speakers today?
Yeah, I'd say one thing I always remind speakers of is this is simple, but it's not easy. Simple, but not easy. And what I mean by that, it's kind of like the analogy of like, I'm no health coach or expert or anything, but if you wanted to lose 10 pounds, what do you need to do? Well, we both know you need to do two things. You need to pay attention to what you eat and you need to exercise. That's it, right? Now that's a very oversimplified elementary version of it, but that's what it is. It's simple, but it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. We'd all be skinny and beautiful, but that's not the way it is. So it's simple. Everything we just talked to, that speak framework, yeah, it's simple. And just make a website, make a demo video, reach out to some people, book some gigs, take good care of them. You build a business. Like it's simple, but it's not easy. It still requires work. It still requires effort. It still requires discipline. And so that's where we really want to help speakers is be alongside as they're building their speaking business and sharing their message and understanding the different pitfalls and things that they may run into or different roadblocks. And like I just need some feedback or some help along this way. That's what we want to do in supporting them.
Yeah, well, Grant, thank you for creating the Speakers Lab, and thanks for all the input today. That was fantastic. As I mentioned, I want to dive into the lightning round. These are just a bunch of fun questions. Doesn't have to be speaking related that I like to ask every leader on these interviews. And the first one is, what's the best advice you ever received, and who gave it to you?
So one line I think about a lot, and I don't know where I heard this or if I came up with this or anything, but the line is, "Who you are is more important than what you do." Who
Hmm.
you are is more important than what you do. I think about that so often. I remind our team regularly. I tell speakers that, speak about that from stage, meaning that, Doug, if you and I, if we're great podcasters, we're great entrepreneurs, we're great speakers, we're great business leaders, if we're great, on the list goes. But if we drop the ball as husbands, as wives, as moms, as dads, if like we're this shell of a human being, like we're really doing it wrong. And so we were talking a little bit earlier before we hit record. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We've been married we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary.
Come
Been
on.
together for 25 years. We've got 3 daughters. So it's me and a house full of women. It's the best. And so I love being a speaker. I love being an entrepreneur. I love what I get to do every single day. But my most important roles, hands down, without question, are being an amazing husband and being an amazing dad. And so if I get those parts right, then everything else is just gravy on top of that.
These just came to me. I don't know if they're a lightning round question or not, but best tip for being a husband after 20 years. Let's go.
I think what has worked well for us is like we just really enjoy being together. Like we genuinely, the stereotypical, she's my best friend, and like, yeah, I totally feel like that. Like if I had the choice to go hang out with some guys or just to be home with her, like 99 nights out of 100, I want to just hang out with her. Like we just really enjoy being together. We really enjoy each other's company. Um, and so I don't know if that's something you teach or you learn or you grow into, but yeah, you better marry right in the first place for sure.
Best parenting tip?
Um, be patient, be graceful. I think that for parents and um, uh, for parents, for spouses, for entrepreneurs, like I say all the time, like we're doing our best. We're doing our best, like as a speaker, as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster, as whatever, like we're doing our best. We're making it up as we go. And so I know with our girls, there's days where I'm just like, man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really crushing this dad thing. And other days where I'm just like, I mean, the other day we had a curveball thrown at us, and my wife and I are like, well, this is new. Like, I don't, what do you do here? Well, how do you deal with this? And like, you're doing your best. So give your kids some grace, give yourself some grace, that you're doing your best and figuring it out as you go.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Um, I would say to enjoy the journey. Like, man, life is, I enjoy my life. I wouldn't trade lives with anybody. But I'm also a very like motivated, driven, hardworking guy. And so sometimes I got to remind myself just to like put my phone down, to stop, to take it in. Like, oh man, this is good. Like life is really, really good. And so, yeah, something along the lines of just to enjoy the journey.
Best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Mm, kind of browsing around here. I'm looking, $100 or less. Um, Seeing if anything comes to mind here. This wasn't within the past year, so I think this was a couple years ago. I got an Aura ring, Oura, and I'm guessing it's probably a little over $100, maybe $200. But use that just for tracking sleep and health, and it's been a good, yeah, it's been a good little device just to keep me on track, make sure I'm not as young as I used to be, and so that helps keep me focused.
What's a book or two that have impacted you the most, either recently or all time?
Um, let's see here. One book I really, really like, especially in the entrepreneurial space, is a book called Rework. It's by the guys from Basecamp, formerly 37 Signals. And so it's, I don't know, 50, 60 short chapters, each couple page chapters. And it's just like some really good, kind of contrarian views on business and entrepreneurship. And so I've always resonated with kind of how they view things, that you want to not live to work, but work to live. And I think they do a good job kind of explaining that and in a good, concise way.
That's good. If you get to spend time with a high impact leader or someone that you admire admire greatly, do you have a go to question that you always ask when you get to meet with them?
Um, I mean, a lot of times I just like to ask about them, their life, like how's things go? Like, what are you excited about? What's working for you? A good question I heard recently is what's in focus? Like, what's happening right now that just feels clear to you? Because I think a lot of times if you are talking with someone, I try to think through um, like so much, if when possible, like so much more than just like, hey, this one token answer that they're going to give, but more like, how is there, what can I do or ask or say to help build more of a relationship with this person long term? Because I don't know, there's probably very few situations where like you met someone, even someone that you looked up to, and they said this one thing and it profoundly, like deeply impacted your life. Like I mean, maybe that happens for some. I don't know that that's happened to me. There's nothing that really comes to mind. But I think more often, like the relationships of people that you do life with on a day in and day out basis, and people that you have some form of connection with, like oftentimes those relationships are going to be deeper, and perhaps the advice or shared experiences you're going to have are going to be more meaningful or impactful.
So, what's in focus for you right now?
Um, Marriage is really, really good right now. Kids are really good right now. Business is good. One thing that's been actually in focus this year at the time of this recording is I've made a lot of progress in my health. It's something I'm pretty proud of. Health is one of those things that I'm a relatively active guy and I played sports and so, but I also turned 40 a few months ago and I'm like,
Oh,
okay, you're
happy
not as young as you
birthday.
used to be. And thanks, man. But you're just like, you gotta just take better care of yourself and be aware that you can't just eat, fruity pebbles and donuts all day, as delicious as both of those things are. And so been really, really intentional about my health and what I'm eating and exercise. And so, I mean, at the time of this recording, I'm down about almost 25 pounds for the year.
Wow. Good for you,
So
man.
pretty proud of that. Of just like, oh man, just do the work, be disciplined. And when people are like, but what's your secret? I was like, there's no secret. Like everything you should be doing, just do that, like
Yeah.
exercise, get a lot of sleep, eat good, the things that you shouldn't be eating, like limit those things or cut them out. Like it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of doing them.
What's something you've done in your life, maybe something you've crossed off your bucket list that you think everyone should experience before they die?
Bucket list. Trying to think what comes to mind for that. I mean, one moment that comes to mind that was really, really cool was I grew up in Missouri, and so I was a big St. Louis Cardinals fan. And so in 2011, my dad and I ended up going to Game 7 of the World Series
Wow.
against the Texas Rangers, and so we got to see the Cardinals win. And so it was just it's not only a cool like sporting experience, but it was a cool sporting experience with my dad.
Yeah.
So is that all the stars have to align for your favorite team to be in Game 7 in a championship, and for you to be able to go see it on a whim. But nonetheless, that was a pretty cool
When
memory.
I'm here in Pittsburgh, so for the Stars to align for the Pirates to make it to Game 7 of the World Series, yeah.
It's gonna be a minute.
Yeah, I hope it'll happen in my lifetime. Is there anything left on your bucket list? Is there anything you wanna do that you haven't done?
Yeah, I really enjoy my life. I enjoy what I get to do. My wife and I and our family, like, we like to travel, we like experiences, we like adventure. So yeah, there's probably a lot of things I want to do. I don't have a my list in front of me here, but different countries we want to visit, and different experiences that we want to have. So um, yeah, but at the same time, like, I I try to be really intentional about making sure that I'm living an ideal life today and not for
Mm,
someday.
yes.
Meaning, like, I'm this is the youngest that I will ever be, is this moment. And so making sure, like, if there's something like, man, I've always wanted to do that, or someday I'm going to do that, like, okay, is there something that's preventing me from doing that now, or like in the very near future? Um, and so I'll kind of connect a couple dots here. You mentioned parenting. Like, one thing that's been a big win for my wife and I and our kids is when I was speaking full time, I always wanted to take my daughter, our oldest at the time, wanted to take her on some type of speaking gig, and I just like, oh man, I'm traveling all the time. I want to take just one kid with me, yeah, but it had to be like the right type of gig. She was pretty young. I was like, okay, I got to be able to like speak, but also kind of keep an eye on her at the same time, if possible. It's got to be, we got to be going somewhere cool. If you're going to the beach in Florida, that sounds more exciting than going to Pittsburgh. No offense, but so I had to have something fun there. But so I did when she was 8, I took her with me to an event, and we dubbed it the 8 is Great trip. And that was so much fun. And so
Wow.
we turned it into a thing where every year, each of our girls take a one-on-one trip with either mom or dad, and we just rotate
Hmm.
years. So this particular year, this past, why this is fresh on my mind, this past week, a week ago, my youngest daughter and I, she's 11, her and I went to Disney. And so we spent
Oh,
two
wow.
days we went one day at Disney and one day at a water park, just the two of us. And it was so much fun. And we had such a great time. And this summer, my wife and our middle daughter will go on a trip, just the two of them, and wherever they want to go, whatever they want to do. And even this, it may not be some type of travel or trip or something. The very first year I did this with our youngest, we rented a hotel in the area, and just a cheap little hotel, and we went to play miniature golf and went ice skating, and
Hmm.
then we came home. That was it. But it's just like, man, it's just the two of us. And
Yeah.
so those experiences with your kids are really, really cool, super rewarding. So that's been something that's definitely moved the needle for us in our family.
I love that. Well, we're about out of time, Grant. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
Man, I appreciate you letting me hang out with you. Again, if you're wherever you are in your speaking journey, if there's anything we can do to help you, support you, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. So feel free to check out the Speaker Lab podcast. We've got nearly 400 episodes there. So a lot of good
Yeah.
content. The book, The Successful Speaker. And again, that Speak framework we walk through goes through much more in depth on just how do you find and book gigs and share your message with the world.
Yeah. Love your podcast as well. Thanks again for adding value to me and everyone that are listening to this, Grant. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.